lifted on their shoulders in every war. If I have one request, yes, just one I ask of you, it's that you stand with me now. Stand, remember, and renew. Stand with those that are now serving. Remember the soldiers of the past. Renew your commitment to freedom, for they have died to make it last. Every battle has its reasons, though they may not always be clear. And I can state that boldly even through my tears. Too many soldiers have fallen in the battles, sieges, and fights. I will not forget them today. I will remember them all through the night. Lester L. Arrowsmith, Colonel, United States Air Force.
our next song.
Good morning, and welcome to Courthouse Road Seventh-day Adventist Church. We are so glad you are here with us in person, and we welcome those who are joining us online. It's a beautiful Sabbath day, really, really hot, so kind of it's like nice to look out the window at the beauty today. But thank you for being with us, and we know that God is with us and that He will bless us. And I'd just like to set on that for just a moment, because there's been a lot that has happened this week in our world, in our country, and it's disturbing and it's unsettling, and there are so many pieces that feel out of control. And, with decisions that are being made, with what has happened in Afghanistan, with the incredible loss of life, with what's happening relationally, with different divisive issues, is unsettling, it's uncomfortable. It's not something we feel like we signed up for. And as I go through my days, it doesn't feel any less unsettling for me, but every morning I'm just like, God, let me make a difference to whomever you put in my place, whomever you put in my sphere of influence. And I work with little people. I have second graders, and I love that. I love working with them, and I want them to know Jesus' love. And then when I work with my colleagues, are they going to see Jesus in me? And I'm not perfect. There's days like, oh, I hope nobody heard that. Or when I get gas, or go to the store, or whatever it is, we have today. We live in a time when things are a little bit uncertain, but we have today. And today can be joyful because God has promised us peace. He has promised us His strength and His power are limitless. And He will walk with us through those days. We don't have to do this by ourselves. And I hang on to that. Otherwise, it's too much. And this week, when we lost those soldiers in Afghanistan, I'm pretty sure that most all of us know somebody or are close to somebody who has been in the military on some level at some time. And when that has happened, I have 2 nephews who both served over there. And when something like this happens, you just like, there are about 13 families that are about to get the most devastating news of their lives. How do you do that? And here's the thing. Those soldiers were there fighting for our freedom. So even though they're not our family members, we have benefited by them being there. And it's the grace of God that carries us through. And so as we go into this service and into this week, it's not a time to feel despondent. It's not a time to feel like giving up. It's a time to instill in our hearts, what can I do to put a smile on someone's face, to bring them hope? And when I bring somebody else hope, you know what else? It puts hope more deeply rooted in my own heart and my own life. And we need hope right now. We need hope. And I hope that today, I love that word, just by being here and by joining us online, we're going to leave this service feeling some reasons to hope. And we're going to just bow our heads right now. We're going to have a prayer for those families that have lost loved ones. And we are going to have a prayer for hope for us and a challenge that we will spread that hope. Let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, we know that you are the mighty God of the universe. You created this universe. There is nothing that is too hard for you. You see each one of us. You know our hearts. You know our fears. You know our hopes. You know our dreams. You know our families. And you know what's going on in this world. We are so sad when we think about the loss of life. And we just ask you to go into the homes of those families who have lost their loved ones this week. You know what they need, God. I don't even know what to pray for that they need, but you do, and you will take care of them because you have promised. Your love never fails. Your compassions are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And we ask that we will remember that promise ourselves. As we go through this service, as we go out the doors into the world, that we will spread hope, that we will have hope planted in our hearts, and we will spread that in our little corners of the world, so that in these challenging times, we will remember we are not walking this journey alone. You are with us, and you are holding us up. you are our stronghold, and you will fight for us. And one day, we can't wait for that. I think it's going to be sooner than we think. We are going to be in heaven where this will not even be happening anymore. And that gives us a lot of reason to hope. Thank you, dear Jesus. In your name, amen. So we at Courthouse Road have a mission of building bridges back to God. I don't know what that's going to look like for you this week, but I'm pretty sure God's going to give you a chance to build a bridge. So go build bridges. And we focus on some things that are important to us here. At school, we call them our big rocks. I don't really know what we call them here. I think we call them values. And they're so important to us. They are things like prayer and our young people, and that this is a safe place, and taking care of our community, and all of those things that show Jesus in a special way to other people. So I challenge you, in these times when we feel stressed, when we feel kind of like, I really don't want to look at today, build a bridge back to God. And we are going to sing again. We're going to sing about power in the blood of Jesus, his sacrifice on the cross. I just read about it this morning before I came here, is what puts his righteousness in us. And with God's righteousness, I can touch the world and build bridges back to God. That's going to be followed by a children's sermon by Naomi Massacoy, and she's going to speak to the children. I hope there's some children watching online. And then Greg Reynolds is going to have a message for us. So I hope you feel God's presence wherever you are, wherever you're seated, if you're in your home, and have hope.
It's nice to see you all this Sabbath morning, and I bet you're all happy to be at church today, whether you are in church in person or watching from home. I know you love Sabbath day. It's my favorite day of the week, and I bet it's yours as well, right? All right, so today's story will be about faith. Why did we choose faith today to be the topic of the children's story? I'll tell you about it. But first, let's just close our eyes and think about it. What is faith? All right, I'll tell you. So, faith is believing or trusting in something even if you don't know what it is or you have not seen it. That is faith. So I will start with a personal story. As many of you know, or some of you might have known, my dad has been sick for a very long time now, and for over a month he was admitted in the hospital. And for the most part of it, he was in an intensive care unit, whereby they take care of the critically or very sick patients. So we were always praying, we were so worried, we were always crying, we were praying to God. And I'll tell you the truth, sometimes we had fear that we might lose him. We had that fear. So, but one thing that struck me is that every time we spoke to Dad, even the time that he was very weak to talk, not only us, but even other friends and family all over the world through phone calls or even in person, anytime they could talk to him, he's the one who could assure them and tell them, I'm going to be fine. And he could tell them that when I get out of this hospital, I want to come out and continue working with the children and the young people. And so it struck me why, he was always seeing the future in a positive way. He had faith. He believed that he will get out of the hospital and continue doing God's work. And guess what? It reminded me of a Bible story. There was a man named Job. And we all know that Job lost everything. His family, his children, his wealth, his friends, everything. But you know what? He never lost faith in God. He believed that despite everything he was going through, despite all the hardships he was going through, he believed that God will heal him and that everything will be fine. And indeed, everything was fine with Job, and he got everything back. And I'm so happy to tell you today that even with my dad, despite him still being sick, we are seeing hope that he will get out of the hospital soon. And that shows you how faith is. Faith is very, very strong. You believe in something even though you've not seen it, but you still believe in it that it will happen. And I want to call on everybody, the children, the adults, everybody. Let's keep having faith. Let's keep having what? Faith. Thank you so much, and be blessed.
Wow. Faith and hope. Those are our foundation words that we use here at church. And today I hope I can bring you a little faith and hope in the message today. I'm Greg Reynolds, one of the elders here. I got to speak last Sabbath here. We had a wonderful audiovisual team in place. But if you missed watching online, like some are now, we want to say we could use the help with our audiovisual team. So if you feel that presence and you would like to help out with that, then please come and contact Lawrence, and he can work you into our team. Commercial over. So today we get into the book of John. We've been working on that. Sorry, I feel like one of those, I know we've just kind of watched the Olympics, and you see those sprinters getting ready to get in the blocks, and they're just sitting there all tensed up and so much energy. And anyway, that's where I'm at right now. So bear with me a minute. Kind of allow the energy to slow down and get me here. We had elders meeting on Wednesday, and I had my sermon prepped and everything, and Miss Karen, you said something that made me stop and reevaluate. She said, "Where's Jesus in this conversation?" Kind of stopped me at that time, and it's kind of like, whoa, okay, yeah. When do we get so involved in our life that we forget Jesus? And so I kind of reevaluated, and so I put today's message together following after that. So we have Blind Man's Bluff. You can see that on the screen here. And so let's see if I can get Slides to work here. Let's back, whoop, went too far. If we could back up, Lawrence, one more. Blind man's buff. Who's played blind man's buff? So, I don't see too many hands out here. Blind man's buff. That's where you would put a blindfold on one person in the, usually it's a schoolyard. That person would be blind, and then all the rest of the kids would run around, and that blind man is supposed to try to find the other kids. Now, if you were in more of a competitive spirit, the buff, my wife I was preparing the screen, and she looked over and said, Greg, isn't it blind man's bluff? So, no, it's blind man's buff is what Wikipedia had for this game. And the idea was buff is the same idea as bopping or tapping somebody on the head. So some of the fun would be in more of the advanced games. You would sneak up behind the blind person and tap them on the shoulder or bop them on the head and, that sort of thing. But I know Pathfinders, I've heard them playing a version of this in the pool. And I'm sure if you've been to a community pool, you've heard somebody yell, Marco. There you go, there you go. So the person that's saying Marco is closing their eyes. They're supposed to have their eyes closed. And they're saying, Marco. And then they hear a voice and they try to swim or try to find whatever. So it kind of gets me the idea, okay, so if you can't see, how do you perceive the world? For me, I'm a very visual person. I got into landscaping so I could, picture, so I get these ideas of things. I'm very entertained with videos and TV, and so at night when I have dreams, I have pictures in my head to sing. But today's story is about a guy who was born blind, who had never seen. What do you think his dreams were like? Did he dream by hearing things, by touch? When you lose one sense, we have people around us. Tim's here, and his sight is very limited. And so it's, we blind people, it's a very limiting thing that they have. And so we'll get into our story here about blind man's bluff. So we are studying the book of John. We're in chapter 9, and we have of course, John is the fourth book of the gospel in the Bible, which is the story of Jesus' life. And he wrote this for the second generation of Christians. He wanted to write a letter because Matthew, Mark, and Luke were kind of recounting for the first generation, being those people who had contact with people who knew who Jesus was. And so they were writing down, okay, I want to write down and set the story straight for who Jesus was. And so John here is setting his story down for us to be able to understand who he was, who Jesus was. So we have gone through John and the story, and John was broken down into different sections. And into John chapter 9 is where we are right now. And that's the story of Jesus going. He had just gone to Jerusalem, and he was in Jerusalem right now, walking around, and he had gone into the temple, and Jesus had been attacked is too harsh of a word, but he had been tested by the Pharisees. There was the adulterous woman was brought to him, and he was saying, okay, so what should we do with her? She was caught in sin, so you know what the penalty is? What should we do here? What did Jesus do? He stopped, wrote in the sand, and everybody left. So he was getting attacked. Then in chapter 8, it goes on where he gets, they start going in and it almost really knocking him down with all the different, the Pharisees keep testing him. You're not a legitimate son. Where do you come from? How do you know how to write? How do you know all of this? We don't think that you are the true prophet of God. And so Jesus is walking along, and we come to chapter 9 here. If we could open up our Bibles to chapter 9, verse 1. Trying to figure out how this works here. Lawrence, we could have the next slide. John chapter 9, verse 1. Before we get into it, I want to talk about, in chapter 9, Jesus comes across the blind man. And the blind man interacts with 5 different people. We have the disciples. Next slide, Lawrence, please. The disciples, the blind man's neighbors and those who had seen him. We have the Pharisees. We also have the parents of the blind man. And of course, Jesus. So let's open up the book of the Bible to John 9, verse 1. Now, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? But Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground, made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Okay, so we got Jesus and his disciples walking along, and the disciples see blind beggar there. And of course, the question is, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? Not, hey, Jesus, how can we help this blind man? It was more, okay, here's a theological question that we want to throw at you. Who sinned? Who's to blame for this man's blindness? A little caveat here. I get frustrated at my crew when they start saying, if a piece of equipment was broken, it's like, who broke this? Who did this? Who took this? Who whatever? They want to find whose blame it goes to. And I get so frustrated with that because I'm the fixer of the group. I want to make sure that it gets taken care of, and then if we can figure out afterwards, then we'll figure that out. But here, the disciples want to see whose blame it was for this man to be blind. And I love Jesus' answer. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Wow. How to diffuse that? Okay, so blind man, you're the sinner. No, it wasn't his parents that were the sinner. It was God. I will take essentially the blame for this because this is going to be for my honor and glory. It's not about trying to see whose blame it is. It's how can this enrich my life? How can this put this forward? And then Jesus goes on, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So he brings it back. I have these that I wear because I am of advanced age, we'll say. I don't have the eyes of when I was in my 30s, when I could be eagle eyes and see everything. So when the light gets lower, I need these a lot more. Al, you understand that? Yeah. But when the light dims, we don't see the definition anymore. And so as Jesus is pointing out here, I wanted to show you who my God is. I wanted to show you who my Father is. I am the light of the world. This is how I react to other people. So this is what his blessing was. And then Jesus does what? Spits on the ground, makes a bit of clay, puts it on the guy's eyes, said, okay, go wash this off. I'm trying to picture this as the blind man sitting there. Okay, there's, you hear. Of course, his senses are heightened. His hearing is heightened. So he's hearing this conversation, and, then he feels the stuff on his face, and, it's like, okay, so you want me to go to the pool of Siloam, the pool sent. So what do I need? How am I going to get there? I guess I'll kind of stumble my way over there. And he gets over there, washes his eyes, and he can see. A miracle has happened. But the key is, he has to leave Jesus at that moment. He has to take the step of faith to go clean his eyes. He could have, wait, I'll just knock this off. No. He did that. He did what the guy had told him to do and walked and got that. But so we get to the point of how the disciples reacted. Their reaction was cold indifference. I'm not going to touch that anymore, Lawrence. It was just like, he's just a science project. We don't need to help him. I'm sure that there was so many blind and, other lepers and other people in Jerusalem, but instead of stopping and helping him, they wanted to have something like that. So let's move along in the story and get to the neighbors and those around the blind man. In verse 8, therefore the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, Is this not he who sat and begged? Some said, yeah, this is he. Others said, he is like him. He said, I am he. Yes, I'm the blind guy here. Hey, look at me, I can see now. Therefore they said to him, well, how were your eyes opened? He answered and said, a man called Jesus made clay, anointed my eyes, and said to me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and I received my sight. Then they said to him, so where is he? And what the blind man said? I don't know. You know, I've walked over to here, and now, of course, he never saw his face, so he doesn't know who he's looking for. I mean, you think of that. All of a sudden receiving sight. And, you know, how excited would you be to all of a sudden be able to see those things? You know, I was hearing somebody talk about, you know, he had never seen an olive leaf, had never seen a sunrise, had never seen a sunset, never seen beauty, never seen ugliness. You know, this guy had been blind, and now he could see. But what was the reaction to him? Like, are you that guy? It's like, yes, I am he. The blind, you know, it was just kind of a, well, just there was belief and disbelief in the neighbors. You know, I would have, you know, if you had been kind of part of his, you know, I'm sure there was a clique of blind people, or, you know, had, you know, I know Steffi and I drive by a guy that sits on the corner, you know, every Sabbath as we drive here. That's his corner. That's where he sits. And, you know, I ask myself, do I have that same cold indifference that the disciples had? Or do I have kind of the reaction that these guys have, is just kind of like, he might have been healed. I don't know if he's healed. You know, that's never ever happened before. So we'll just move along. So you had that reaction. Then we'll move on to verse 13. They brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now, who are the Pharisees? Pharisees were kind of the justice and law of the time. The police officers, you could say, or those who decided what was right and what was wrong in the society, as it were. They, you know, what was it? There were 174, at the time of Jesus' time, there was 174 new laws on how to keep the Sabbath. One of them was making clay. So you think, what did Jesus just do? He spat down on the ground, grabbed the little mud, and put it on the guy's eyes. He just broke the Sabbath. Anyway, they brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now it was the Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Okay, so another strike against Jesus in the Pharisees' eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he had received his sight. So he said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Therefore some of the Pharisees said, oh, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. Others said, oh, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. So, okay, did he do the miracle? If he did the miracle, then he would be a prophet or somebody who had the power of God. But if he broke the Sabbath, you know, that wouldn't be of God, would it? You know, so they're having this theological debate. Then they said to the blind man, what do you say about him because he opened your eyes? I love the blind man's honesty. He is a prophet. You know, he has power. You know, look, I'm seeing. I didn't see before, now I can see. Don't you get it, how excited I am about this? So you have the Pharisees on defense of their values. You know, they have worked so hard to set up the structures of how to keep the Sabbath and how we keep society in line to make sure that they are protected so that they don't break any of the laws. You know, how important, you know, some of it might have been if people see that this, then we're going to lose our power. And, you know, so there's all this type of reaction going through these guys' head on what their protection is. Okay, so they figured that the blind man, he said he is a prophet. That's not what they wanted to hear. So we move on in the story to verse 18. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight. And they called the parents of him who had received his sight. Okay, we get the parents involved. If anybody knows somebody, it's your parents. Right? Okay, and so they asked the parents, saying, "Is your son, who you say was born blind, how then does he now see?" Okay, so you've heard the Pharisees going around trying to trap Jesus. If you're the parents, you're like, uh-oh, I think they just trapped us. Because if I say, yes, this is our son, and yes, he was born blind, and yes, he now sees, you know, what are we going to say? So his parents answered them and said, "We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But what means he now sees, we do not know, or who opened his eyes, we do not know. He is of age. Ask him. He will speak for himself." Wow. They just kind of deferred it. They didn't want to speak up. And I asked myself, why did they not want to protect their son? Why did they do this? His parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." Wow. I mean, as a parent, I want to protect my children as much as possible. And so the fact that they just deferred, you know, I guess the fear of the Pharisees and being kicked out of their societal position, whatever that was more overwhelming than accepting that their son had just received sight. You know, I feel sad for those parents, you know, that just kind of, okay, well, you know, we'll put that off, you know. Was listening to a book on tape, Wild at Heart, and John Eldridge had in it, he talks about man was set for adventure. We are, you know, just inside us guys, we are looking for the next conquest, the next, you know, giant to fight, the next mountain to climb, whatever it is. And he said one of Adam's sin was his passiveness. When Eve came to him and said, you know, here is the fruit, he sat by. He didn't step forward. He didn't take that and make an actual effort to protect his wife. And I think that this, for the parents, their I guess, quote, sin in this is taking that passive role of not protecting their child in this. So we move on. So they again called the man who was blind and said to him, "Give God glory. We know that this man is a sinner." So the blind man answered them and said, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see." So the Pharisees are trying to grill him on whether they think Jesus is a sinner. Then they said to him again, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And of course, as somebody who's been grilled after a while, you start getting upset at being grilled. He answered them, "I told you already, and you did not listen." A little sarcastic comment coming. "Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" You know, I just love the humanity in that. It's kind of like, come on, man, I've answered your questions over and over and over. I know this man healed me, and this is the promise that I have. And then they reviled him and said, "You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from." They didn't know who Jesus was from. Well, they did know where he was from, but they didn't want to acknowledge it. The man answered and said to them, "Why is this a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from? Yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. But if this man were not from God, he could do nothing." Wow. God had the power. Jesus had the power. He's the one that reached out to him and gave him the sight. And here he is preaching to them. Of course, their reaction, the Pharisees' reaction, is they answered and said to him, "You were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us?" And they cast him out. They couldn't take it anymore. When you're faced with truth, it hurts. And if you can't face it, you got to deal with it. So, again, the Pharisees attacked and reviled the man. And his reaction was to defend himself with the truth and with Jesus. Now, the part I like of this story is the end. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said to him, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" He answered and said, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" Of course, he hadn't seen Jesus' face. He might have recognized his voice, but, so much extra energy going on. And after being cast out of society, after he was finally supposedly accepted back in, he answers, "Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you." Then he said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. I think it's so cool that Jesus heard that they had cast him out of out of society, essentially. And he went and he found them. And he said to him, "Do you believe in the Son of God?" Jesus wants to do that with us. He wants to go after us. He wants to lift us up. That is who God is to us. And that is the cool thing in that. Now, it reminded me of a passage in the Ministry of Healing that Pastor Rick had shared with us. It is that Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Savior mingled with men as one who desired their good. He showed his sympathy for them. He ministered to their needs and won their confidence. Then he bade them follow me. And I look at the pattern of this, and I thought it was so cool how this fit into the story of the blind man. He was mingling amongst the people. Next slide. And so Jesus' method alone will give the true success in reaching the people. He mingled. They were walking along, And Jesus saw this. I'm sure Jesus didn't say, I'm going to go heal a blind man today when he woke up that morning, because the disciples were the one that instigated the conversation. But then when Jesus saw that, he showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Jesus, again, disarmed the disciples' accusations and did the healing touch. He looked at what the guy needed and reached down and did the action to heal him. And then at the end of it, he bade him follow me. So Jesus searched for the blind man, asked him if he believed in the Son of God, and the blind man worshiped him. So we go back to that quote again. Jesus' method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Savior mingled with men as one who desired their good. He showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Then he bade them follow me. That's what we talk about when we're talking about building bridges back to God. Being that irresistible influence, that point that we can go out into society, meet people, talk to them, touch them, see what their needs are, lift them up. And that's when we say, hey, there's this guy that I know. There's this Jesus fellow. If you haven't heard about him, that's why I am what I do, because I'm a follower of Jesus. That's what brings us together. Now, next slide. I wish this were the end of the story. To leave it at the healing. But Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, after he had healed the guy and after the guy had worshiped him. For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, are we blind also? If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remains. I kind of struggled with that until I was able to read that in the Amplified Bible. And that version puts it this way. Then Jesus said, I came into the world for judgment. And they have in quotes to expand the word judgment, to separate those who believe in me from those who reject me, to declare judgment on those who choose to be separated from God. So I came into the world for judgment, for those to be separated from God, so that the sightless would see and those who would see would become blind. And so some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and said to him, are we blind? If you were blind to spiritual things, you would have no sin and would not be blamed for your unbelief. But since you claim to have spiritual sight, you have no excuse, so your sin of guilt remains. So because they knew what they were doing is what made them blind. It wasn't the fact that they weren't blind. So it's that blind man's bluff, that sense of, I'm making myself blind because I don't want to see, not because I can't see. And that's a powerful thing. So again, next slide. Let's review this. Who were the people that Jesus came in contact with, or the blind man came in contact with? The disciples. Do we fall into this category of somebody who has kind of a cold indifference to the people around us? Or are we like the neighbors? Kind of I kind of believe, I don't believe, I'm not excited for people. I'm going to do my own thing. Or Are we defensive of our belief system? Are we going to put our beliefs higher than somebody else's instead of showing them who Jesus is? Or do we become scared and intimidated, like the parents, that their position in society will be tainted or harmed or, Or do we become like Pharisees and attack those who put limits on what we're doing, on who Jesus is and how we can help others? And I hope we can fall into the category of the last one, to have compassion for both the men and physically and emotionally, so that we have compassion for others as we go about our life today. And from now on, that we'll have compassion for others. Thank you.
Now it's time. Now it's time for offering. Over the last couple of years, I've been on a journey to learn more about finances. During this time, I've learned a lot, realized I have a lot more to learn, but most importantly, realized that tithing and offering have taught me a lot about money. Finally, as an adult, I'm able to appreciate the act of tithing and offering. Tithing has taught me gratitude. Every time that I take a moment to give my tithe and offering, I go through a list of things that I'm grateful for, things great and small, whether it's running water, rain, the birds on my front porch, a house, a church to worship in, or peace. I'm grateful. And tithing is a reminder to be grateful for these things. Tithing has taught me generosity. Not only do I give tithe, but I also think of other ways to give, whether through charities outside of church, whether it's to the person at the end of the corner asking for money or assistance, or whether I give of my time. Without tithing, I don't feel I would be as generous, looking for opportunities to give back. Finally, tithing has taught me to trust and to not be selfish. Tithing is a tangible way for me to pause and say, God, take this little that I have and use it to do much. So this day, when you give, whether online at courthousesga.com, through the church app, or texting 84321, or in person through the offering box in the back, I ask that you take a moment to think about all the lessons that tithing has taught you. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to learn the lessons that you have for us through giving our tithes and our offerings. Today, may you take our small amount and multiply it, that it may help others to learn of your love and your mercy. May you comfort those who are hurting, and may we, in turn, be a blessing to someone this week. In your name, I do pray. Amen. Happy Sabbath.
Have you been blessed? I've been totally blessed and challenged, and I would just like to thank Greg for, laying that story out in a way I had never heard before, and in a way that, it constantly was putting me in a place of saying, what reaction do I fall most easily to? Maybe I fall most easily to more than one of those. But then at the very end was like, this poor innocent blind man went through a lot, so that the works of God might be shown through him. And from the first time you said that, I couldn't get that out of my mind. And I'm like, that's what I want. I want the works of God to be shown through me. Now, they were misinterpreted by all of those people. But I guess that's my challenge for myself and for you. As we go from this place, where do we see? Where do we see we fall in the reactions? And can we count on the faith that Naomi talked about and the hope that God's works will be shown through us? Not our works, God's works. So as we go out into the world, we have lots to hope about, and we have lots to have faith for. Let's build bridges back to God by letting his works be visible in our lives. Let's bow our heads. We are so thankful, God, for you. We are so thankful for what you are doing in our church, in our lives, in our world. And even though there's like chaos out there, you're still at work. And we can still see you. Help us to look for that and help us to participate in that and to be someone who your works are visible in. Thank you that you are faithful. In your name, amen.